We're all owned by the Syndicate, body and soul. Or should I just say body?
Hello, filthy movie lovers, something weirdos, and anti-criterion bros, to the 7th episode of the Sin Syndicate, the only podcast that can see past the green emulsion scratches and knows that the first rule of dirty filmmaking is make it before the tape goes. My name is Gentry Austin, writer and researcher, and I'm here with my co-host, adult film historian Casey Scott. And today's sexploitation journey will find us delving further than we've ever delved before into the colorful world of pre-porno chic 70s softcore grindhouse, with a specific emphasis on the 1972 film Blue Money and its Bohemian girl next door star Barbara Mills.
In a permissive world corrupted by greed and a lust for kicks, there is a price men are willing to pay for the innocence of young girls. They could be the girls next door.
Look, I'd really like to get into some work right now.
I have to be straight with you. I don't relish the idea of seeing you boss some guy for money. I just think you can do better than that.
But first, some housekeeping. Casey, how are ya? What have you gotten me into this week? And
I know,
what
you
have
texted
you got?
me. Well, first of all, welcome to California. Welcome to color. Welcome to the world, wonderful world of color. Not exactly the Disney version, but I messaged you and I was inspired by the Gretchen Rudolph dive. Was like, someone who I really love, who I feel like maybe shining a light on that doesn't get nearly enough attention, is Barbara Mills. So I threw some titles at you, and you surprised me by saying, "Oh, I've actually seen none of her films." So I said, "Oh, right. Great! Oh, good. Okay, good. This is going to be a great little miseducation." So
the peek behind the curtain is Casey gave me 3 films. And he's like, well, which one should we talk about? Well, and I'm like, well, I haven't seen any of them. So I went ahead and watched all 3. Yeah. And I think that Blue Money, which was one of the suggestions, was easily the most interesting. And I think there's a lot more to unpack with this one than the other 2, which we'll probably talk about as well. But Blue Money is, I think, the standout. And it's, like you said, it's one of Barbara's best performances for sure.
Yeah, she's terrific in it.
But do you have any corrections? You want to jump into that?
I do, yes. Yeah, so housekeeping. Okay, so I guess the first one that I wanted to do was going further back to Rent a Girl. I'm still talking to Anton Holden. And he emailed me. I emailed him after he commented on Facebook, and he discussed how he remembers William L. Rose showing up to direct Rent-A-Girl, wearing jodhpurs and riding boots and a swagger stick. So he showed up like Erich von Stroheim or like Otto Preminger to make his first movie. I'm still in the process of organizing more detailed Q&A with him, and I'm hoping that I can record that, and potentially we can either include that in an episode or have like a bonus episode or something.
That'd be great.
But going back to Run Swinger Run, Sean Langrick messaged me and had 2 very interesting connections to open my eyes about. So I mentioned that Barry Mahon said that a guy named Sugarman ran Chancellor Films before Sandy Johnson took over, and I could not find the Sugarman. Well, Sean, God love you, found him. His name was Harold Sugarman, but it was spelled Sugerman, not Sugar with an A.
A-R.
And yes, so he was the executive director of Chancellor Films, and he, like a lot of our favorite exploitation people, started in classic Hollywood. And he worked in the advertising departments of Universal, United Artists, and Paramount Pictures. And then he actually was involved with a lot of the foreign imports, and he formed a dubbing studio called Duex Film Studios in New York that would dub, imports. I think that studio was probably, I think it was still around when he was running Chancellor. So I imagine that is where a lot of different voiceover artists would go and record voiceovers for some of these Chancellor Films pictures too. he also found a very interesting connection to Keith O'Connell, who, we were wondering, well, how did this guy get involved with this movie and Busty Brown? So Sean pointed me to a book that I need to read called The Wizard of Odds, Odds, by Charlie Rosen, which is about a guy named Jack Molina. And he described Keith O'Connell. Keith O'Connell is discussed in this book a lot. He was an expat Irish actor who hung out with a lot of other expat British and Irish actors, including Errol Flynn. So he hung out regularly with Errol Flynn. So the connection to Mahon is through Errol. He was actually involved with production a lot more than I thought. He had a home that was used as a location for many different X-rated films into the hardcore era.
Wow. And
then even going further into the hardcore era, he was the star of Lord Farthingay's Holiday. Sean let me know that was shot at the home of Norm Arno, who was a loop producer, and he distributed Deep Throat on the West Coast. And then he eventually started VCX, which was taken over by his cousin Rudy Sutton in 1989 after he went to prison after this My Porn conviction, and then Rudy's son David took over, and now he runs it. So it was a very interesting. He sent me so much.
He sounds like
info.
An interesting guy. Yeah.
I definitely need to pick up this book because apparently he is a pretty substantial figure in this book, in this story. So, and along with several other different people in the industry in the late 60s and into the 70s. So and apparently that book is available to read on the Internet Archive. So I have some more reading to do.
Yeah, and so jumping off on Chancellor Films, Alex DeSanto, he also had mentioned that he's pretty firm in the understanding that most of that stuff was thrown out. We had talked about, what happened to all this Chancellor Films stuff. And he said that a lot of the stuff that Mike and Distrapix got in their initial... Well, what did they get out of that initial raid from Movie Lab? Did they get 1 or 2 films?
I only got a few, and I'm wondering, I don't know how those negatives ended up at Movie Lab. It's possible that they were split, or it's possible that those were negatives that the independent producers kept there, and then the movies were distributed by Chancellor. But films that were produced and distributed by Chancellor, apparently those negatives were kept at a different lab, which is now long gone. They closed almost 10 years ago. Yeah.
Is this the Magno Sound Lab?
Yes, and you'll see that name on a lot of credits of stuff, because it was basically where people would... It was a sound... It's where... they had editing... They had editing rooms, they had screening rooms, so people would screen their finished product or rough cuts at Magno, and they also stored negatives and things like that for filmmakers. So, yeah, I think they held a lot of these titles for like 40 to 50 years. So by the time they closed, they didn't do any kind of reaching out to filmmakers or producers or anybody on this old paperwork. Like, do you want this shit? They threw it away.
So, yeah, don't hold out hope for any of those showing up anytime at all. Yeah.
Not unless they were distributed. That's the thing. This Milligan discovery is now making me think about all these other films that have been distributed internationally. Like, I just discovered that Bunny Yeager's movie Room 11, there's a 16 millimeter negative in the Swedish Film Institute's archive in Sweden, and that film is lost here. There are no prints. So I'm like, okay, who's going to Stockholm to get this negative out, because that's the only way we're going to see this. So I was very shocked to find that, actually.
It does sound like international might be the place to start looking for a lot of these lost prints. I'm sure people already have been, and they are, but...
Well, even like the one Milligan film, I believe the way that the Severin announcement described it was that it was sent over there for potential distribution, and it was not picked up and distributed there, but the company that they sent that print to deposited everything they had into an archive, and that's how it was found. And that's kind of like Harry Novak did the same thing. I'm going through the Novak stuff right now for my Letterboxd reviews, and he had a lot of prints and stuff that he just never picked up, but he had prints of it. That's the only reason why some of that stuff is still existing and is out on home video. Like The Office Party, I think, is one of those. Some of the Whit Boyds and some of the other stuff that he handled or was, supposed to distribute. He only had prints because people wanted him to distribute, and he passed, and he just kept the print.
Yeah.
Chit a little to your right, Joe. Mary, move your legs up. Up!
When you're a beautiful young girl, desperate and hungry, what is your limit? What is your price? Blue Money. Every incredible scene is real, filmed where it happened. A graphic look behind the camera of an adult filmmaker.
What would you do, for instance, if your daughter were to make pornographic films?
They were not bad girls, but they needed money badly. Would you perform for this man for $1,000?
Give him something to come home to. Turn him on. Caress him. Move your incredible little ass. Love him.
Blue Money. A true case history, stranger and more daring than any fiction. A film that explores the price of innocence and the fate of an ambitious man who paid for his dreams through the corruption of desperate girls. Blue Money. Before you condemn them, see the real story and ask yourself, how far would I go for $1,000? Absolutely adults only.
But let's dive right into Blue Money, which is, I'd say it cues much closer to, we've talked a lot about sexploitation from the 60s in the past, but this is, I'd say, closer to the golden age of pornography than the golden age of sexploitation. Wouldn't you agree?
It's almost the golden age of pornography.
It's right on that line of between the two, I feel like.
Yeah, it's in between the major transition from soft to hard. At this time, hard was being produced. There was still softcore stuff that was being produced. Like, this was shot in 1971, released in 72, so it was released the same year as Deep Throat.
Yeah. Do a little table setting for us about where we... Yeah, exactly. Like, more on that. Mm-hmm. Like, where are we exactly? Where is America in sex films right at this point when this was released? Because this is a contemporary piece. It's talking about what's happening at that moment, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's based on the real experiences of Bob Chinn and Alain Patrick. Or, for the correctness, Alain Patrick. Alain Patrick Chapuis, his real name. Yeah, by this time, they had both been shooting tons of hardcore in Los Angeles, and softcore. They'd kind of gone back. They made films that kind of were mixes of the two, at least as Bob describes them. And we still don't know how many they shot because they didn't have their real names on them, and they would sometimes shoot 2 movies in a day.
Are these full-length feature films, or are these loops?
They're like 60-minute movies. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot of like 16 millimeter stuff that would show up in like storefront theaters where it's just easy to make duplicate prints, and then they get distributed in these little tiny theaters. But 72, I mean, it was still illegal to shoot. And I'm going to focus specifically on California because that's where we are this week.
Right.
Yeah, so Los Angeles was a hotbed of like vice, trying to bust these productions. And I think that they'd been a little lax on softcore, as they didn't used to be, but I think as time went on, they became more lax with softcore being produced. But with hardcore, yeah, I mean, it was basically like they were arresting people under pandering and prostitution laws. So shooting in Los Angeles was always a huge risk, and that's why a lot of filmmakers would go up to San Francisco to shoot because there was less pressure up there. Not that it was legal up there, but right. I think the cops were a little more lenient. I think there were still records of like busts up there too, but yeah. So Chinn and Patrick were both constantly concerned that their stuff would be busted. And if you notice, in the early days of early hardcore, it's a very tight group of people. They use a lot of the same actors because once you develop a trust with people, like specific actors and actresses, you want to keep that group tight and insular because you don't want someone coming in, potentially getting arrested and ratting to the vice cops, which happened in gay film production in Los Angeles. A guy named Joe Markham did that and had Jay Bryan taken out. He had to flee the country and flee to Hawaii around this time.
Yeah, and so in this movie,
it's not a good time.
Which is based on a story idea from Alain. In this movie, they're making feature-length films, I believe, because he even says at one point, like, we're not making loops. This is a real one with a story. Right. So it seems like...
Well, at that time, they were injecting story because that was kind of their out for... It had to have some kind of
socially redeeming
artistic,
value.
social redeeming value. And that was an argument that was also used for softcore, but with hardcore, it became much more serious. So it's kind of, you'll see a lot of stuff around this period that has like morality plays. Shockingly, a lot of films that I was just watching a ton of movies from 70 and 71, a lot of films end with like really violent, brutal murders. It's kind of, they're very moralistic in their early days. They're kind of like, well, you know, these orgies end with like a massacre. There are a few too many films that end with like violent bloodshed.
Yeah, and they're really abrupt sometimes. It's like the last act will just come out of nowhere and it's like a murderous rampage or something like that. I never thought about it that way, that it might be like tied in with them making a point, like people getting their just desserts.
Well, that's kind of like a film that was kind of connected to the Chinn world is, I think a lot of people remember it as Sex Psycho, because that's the title Something Weird gave it. It was directed by a guy named Walt Davis, who did a movie called Evil Come, Evil Go with Bob Chinn, who produced it. That movie is insane. It came out, Vinegar Syndrome reissued it as Widow Blue, but that's one where it's like, that movie is filled with murder. It's filled with horrible people and tons of gore, and it's just, that was 1970. So it is, I don't know what they were thinking with that one, but it is kind of like, well, we have to have some kind of social redeeming value, so we're just going to show everyone as being terrible and fucked up.
Which is interesting when we look at this movie, because I think can we spoil the ending here?
Sure.
I mean, he gets arrested, but the last scene is him kind of like staring out in the ocean, like, we're going to be fine. It's going to be okay, right? How did you read
optimistic.
it?
It's optimistic.
Yeah, it's very optimistic. It's not like him like locked behind bars.
No.
It's not a dark ending.
It's, well, I don't know. There's a lot to talk about with Alain Patrick. I don't know if you wanted to go to read the synopsis first before we dive really deep into it.
So Jim, played by Alain Patrick, would seem like any other ordinary young man trying to make ends meet and support his wife, played by Barbara Mills, and their young daughter, while pursuing his dream of sailing around the world. But his profession is anything but ordinary. Jim is a filmmaker in the highly lucrative and also highly illegal world of X-rated movies. Describe X-rated movies at this time, like X-rated non-hardcore movie.
But it's about the hardcore industry, right?
Yeah.
Because by 71, when it was shot, it was becoming the future. Like the first hardcore film is technically has been recorded as this movie called Electro Love, which is about like a bunch of sex robots, and it's shot in L.A. So the first recorded, and actually Mona gets credit for that too. So honestly, I think hardcore, the golden age is kind of associated with New York, because that's where like Radley Metzger was and Damiano, but Spinelli and Howard Zeem were out doing hardcore, really actually good hardcore features before either of those directors had done anything on hardcore. So Mona's 70, and then Electro Love is 69, I believe. So 69 is kind of the start of like, okay, we're going to push the envelope. And there's also a film called like Weekend Vacation, I believe, which has like some blowjobs and things like that. You'll notice a lot of the early hardcore tries to avoid actual penetration shots. They'll stick to like handies and oral action, but everything else, and like fingers, but anything else is kind of like, well, we could get in real trouble if we show penetration.
So my question is, this film could have been, why wasn't it hardcore? Do you think that was an intentional choice?
Absolutely. No, I think because, I mean, at this point, so it's interesting. So by this point, so for some context, Bob Chinn, which by the way, the day we're recording today is his birthday, May 10th.
Yeah, I just noticed that.
He's 82 years old. Happy birthday, Bob. Love Bob. One of my favorite people. So he started out with a company called Canyon Films, which was run by Ed DePriest. And Ed DePriest, I think a lot of people know him for like 1 Million AC/DC, which is this terrible movie that Ed Wood wrote. And Alain Patrick is in. And and so is Gary Kent, who is also in this as a favor for him. And that's where he met Alan. Bob Chinn and Alan met at the offices, because Alan was directing movies for DePriest at that time as well. So they both started working together and producing these really quick movies that cost them like $750 to make. and I think how much? And Ed DePriest would buy them from them directly and pay $1,500. So
Love Affairs of Aphrodite, would that be one of those?
Well, Affairs with Aphrodite is a little more substantially budgeted. That was shot for Ed DePriest, but that's like a strictly softcore movie. We're talking hardcore. So like they started shooting these weekend wonders, but once they kind of figured out a good way to make double their money, because for $750 in one day, they figured, well, the way we work really fast, we could shoot 2 movies in a day. So that's what they would do. They'd use the same cast, the same sets, and Bob would just write a quick little nothing script. And they'd shoot a second movie and then sell it to somebody else. So they get the money from Ed and then the money from whoever else bought the second movie. And they were turning out profit this way. So they did this for a couple years. And then they, together with Bob's partner, Linda Adrain, formed a company called Lucky 3 Productions. And then they started doing their own production and distribution. Alain was an actor first. So he came to Hollywood to become an actor. So you'll see him in little bit parts in TV movies and big movies, but he didn't get leads except for in softcore stuff. So like There She Blows for Dave Friedman, which was a William Allen Castleman movie. He's the romantic lead in that. He's in 1 Million AC/DC. So he wanted to make movies on the side in kind of like a life imitates art situation. He had an ex-wife and a young daughter to support. And so the daughter in the movie is actually his daughter, Vanessa.
Yeah, I figured.
And the production company is Nissa Productions, which even the production company for Blue Money is named after his daughter. Like this whole thing was to earn money to take care of his daughter. They put in $35,000 into this movie and were able to sell it to Crown International, because that has much wider distribution than hardcore had at that point. And they knew that they could make more money potentially that way. So it really was an intentional move by Alain, not just to kind of exercise some kind of demons about making these movies and how there were these different conflicts with him as this married man and father, being tempted by all these women that he was working with, but also to kind of keep developing this nest egg so that he could take care of his family.
Los Angeles Vice Squad Photographic Surveillance Team Number 2. Suspect Jim DeSalle, age 25, Canadian citizen. Suspected of manufacturing and distributing pornographic material.
And the similarities, with Bob's life are very similar too. And he discusses that in his book. But it's kind of weird because the situation in this film is much more like his later life, where, he had kids with his wife, and his wife was kind of like, do you have to keep leaving to go make these movies? Can't you stay with me? And at that time he had moved to Hawaii, and he kept having to come back to the mainland to make these movies and had to leave his family behind. So it's very similar to the situation in this film. It only happened to him years later after he made this film that all of a sudden his life started imitating this art that he'd already made. So it's very interesting.
So Bob's executive producer on this picture, and he also does the narration for the government agent. Are they FBI? Is that made clear?
No, it's Vice. It's just Vice.
Vice Department. Okay, yeah.
So he's the Vice Department of the LAPD. Yeah.
You see him at the end, very briefly at the end.
With Roland Miller, and Roland Miller plays the guy who ripped Suzanne Fields' wig off, and he and Bob made a ton of movies together, like Devil's Garden and Brother Sister and All-American Woman, I think. All-American Girl, I believe, was them too.
Did Bob shoot this as well? Was he the cameraman?
No.
Okay.
No, that was R. Michael Stringer. So R. Michael Stringer is most commonly known for his work with Gary Graver and Al Adamson, and then he also worked in hardcore briefly, which he does not like to talk about because, He's been asked by the Vinegar Syndrome people because they put out some movies he shot, and he's like, anybody who worked in that Graver company, they have that Graver mentality of like, listen, we're all into this together. We're not going to talk. It's a very LA thing. It's like when you reach out to San Francisco filmmakers and even cast members, it's very different from an LA situation because they constly were worrying about getting busted and arrested.
Yeah,
that too. That too.
Well, so you mentioned Alain Patrick's story. Watching this, it almost felt like I was like, is this his passion project? He came up with the story idea, he stars in it, he directs it, but you kind of made it sound like this was just it's a money making project. It might not have been that personal to him.
No, I think it is personal because it is his life. that he's putting into this film. That's his daughter in the movie that he's making these movies for the money to take care of his daughter. So it is passionate and it's personal. I just kind of wonder about like putting his I think at that point, because his real name wasn't on any of these hardcore films that he was doing. He appears in a lot of them, not doing hardcore, but he's in like the Johnny Wad movies, which he helped shoot with Bob. But it just makes me wonder, like, I don't think it was any kind of stepping stone to doing major Hollywood work. I could be wrong, but I don't think that he was shooting it with that in mind.
Have a nice day. Okay. Say goodbye to Daddy. Say bye-bye.
Yeah. Do we know anything about the guy that's credited as the writer, Nick Boritz?
Bob described him as an out-of-work writer that they hired to write the script for them. The final script, they revised it themselves, Bob and Alan. So basically, they got like a professionally written script by this guy, and then they revised it to make it a little more personal. Bob describes it as they had a kind of a story session where they told Nick exactly what they wanted. Nick went and wrote the script, came back, they looked at it, and then they made changes accordingly and added things that were like personal to them or reflected what their experiences were like.
Okay. Well, and even looking at the marketing campaign as well, maybe this was kind of their bid for serious attention and maybe some mainstream success, because all signs point to that, right? Getting a professional script writer. I mean, they've got this kind of flashy marketing campaign all about like, what would you do for $1,000 for this man? And it's very timely and of the moment. So, that's all Crown. Yeah. They sold the movie and moved on. They didn't get any monies from that. Crown International bought it outright, so all the advertising was theirs. They kept the title Blue Money. They kept. That was Alan's idea, because he told Bob, we make these movies. They're called Blue movies. So the money we make on these movies is Blue money. And so that was the germ of the idea that exploded into this film. All the advertising and everything, the trailer, everything was Crown International. It was all Crown.
That's the same way with all the distributors in this genre, unless they produced it in-house. But Crown didn't produce this or finance it. Yeah, so Alain Patrick, we didn't mention, he is a French-Canadian, and he plays a French-Canadian as well in this movie. And he has a pretty thick accent. Yes. Which, a lot of reviews of the movie kind of call him out for that. They say he's not a great actor. What are your feelings on his performance? Fine. I think he, for someone who's playing himself, I think he's doing a fine job. I think it's also kind of interesting that he really doesn't paint himself, because he's kind of playing himself, as particularly sympathetic. No. I think he is tempted into an extramarital affair with one of his actresses, which is crazy, because why would you ever cheat on Barbara Mills? Like, I know, right? What? You have Barbara Mills at home. She loves you. So, I think he's a fine actor. It's interesting because at the time he was represented by a big agent named Paul Kohner. So Paul Kohner was a major player in agents. He handled Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, Billy Wilder, like major stars. He also handled Alain Patrick for his R-rated stuff and for his television stuff. And actually, the yacht used in Blue Money belongs to Patrick Kohner Jr., so his agent's son's yacht was used in this film. So I think he's fine, considering that he's basically playing himself. I give him a little grace for that. And also he was directing, and there's a lot of other stuff involved. So, but I don't think he would have let anyone else play this role, because it's him.
What was the whole pretense about, I know a couple of guys? I mean, why didn't you just come out and tell those people what you did?
Because it's our private life.
Oh, yeah, our life.
You were really serious with those people. You really were. You didn't say anything about it when I started making those films.
I didn't know.
Well, you're eating off of it, love, and you drive a car off of the money, and we're building a boat off of the money.
You've gotten so into a completely indifferent thing.
I know. It's dead space.
Yeah, so Barbara Mills plays his wife, making her grand introduction, coming down the staircase naked, holding their young daughter. It's
Which
great.
Is very, very nude Bohemian, yes.
Yes. And speaking of,
it's a good
give us a
intro.
quick background on Barbara. Like, she was born in Oxford, Massachusetts.
Gosh, where do we even start with Barbara? So Barbara, I guess I should preface by saying Barbara was the first sexploitation actress I ever reached out to.
Wow, okay.
She was, by that time, she was only in films for like 3 years. It was a very brief period. And then she had her first child, which was her son Nigel. But her story is essentially that she was from Massachusetts. She came out to Venice at 17 years old. Didn't stay there that long because she went back to Massachusetts until her mother passed away in, I think, March 1969. Then she went to New York, and that's where she started modeling. So she started modeling in New York, and from there she went back to Los Angeles. That's where she met Frank Mills, who was a photographer and a cameraman. He was also in these films. I think, the interesting thing is, and I didn't know, I really resisted updating IMDb about this, but it's very interesting to note that while Barbara never ever did hardcore, she went into the industry knowing that she had her limits and that she wasn't going to do that, and no one ever asked her or forced her to do it. Frank did. He did a movie. His big starring role is Adultery for Fun and Profit, which came out in 1971. They're together. They're a gorgeous couple. Barbara described him as looking like John Lennon. He really does have like that Beatles look. He kind of has that Beatles hairdo. Gorgeous couple. So through a neighbor of Frank's, who Barbara doesn't remember who it was, she connected with Hal Gathu. And Hal Gathu was like a huge agent at that time. He was one of the 3 big agents in California. It was him, it was Dick James with Pretty Girl, and it was Reb Sawitz, who was Sunset International. Hal Gathu just started getting her work. And
she got a lot of work.
She did. She worked very regularly. Yeah, because she was kind of this Bohemian girl who thought, I'll take off my clothes, and she described it as like she showed up like it was a job. She wasn't aspiring for it to become a career. She did it because it was good money. It was something that she could do and not feel uncomfortable doing. And it's interesting because I'm not sure at what point people started noticing that she wasn't just a model, that she could act. Like if you gave her a script, she knew the lines, and she could actually make them mean something, which a lot of these models were not doing. So when you have her in movies like Blue Money, which is kind of a late movie for her, because by then she had done like Matinee Wives and Love Garden, which she's terrific in both of those. But Blue Money was one of the last ones she did, I think. Her last one she did was a movie called Panama Red, and she was very pregnant in that movie. And that was a movie that she did for Bob, and it was shot partially in her and Frank's house in Venice, and also Alan's house in Marina del Rey, or his apartment in Marina del Rey. And then she retired and had a kid. Frank continued to shoot in adult films, and she would do makeup on those films. So she did makeup on like films by Alan Kohlberg. She did makeup on some of Bob's films, I believe, and I think she was like a script girl on a few of those films too. But she really embraced art more. She was an artist.
A painter as well, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. That's how I found her, was because she had a website for her art, and she was selling it in Venice, where she stayed and lived with Frank and her kids. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she pursued art, but she also taught like special ed kids and pursued a degree in education. Yeah, she really just had a really storied life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's said that she passed away in Thailand. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So
how did she end up there?
When I emailed her, she was still in Venice, and she was very cordial. I'll put it that way. I don't think she'd come around to the idea of people contacting her about her work. Because again, like we've discussed many times, these films were not on video. So when they started coming out on video, all of a sudden, people are going to want to talk to you. And she used either her real name, her married name, Barbara Mills, or her maiden name, Barbara Karen, on like 99% of the stuff. She didn't hide under a pseudonym. She moved to Thailand because her son Nigel moved there and was running a catering company. and so she moved to Thailand, and was there when she passed away. She and Frank, I believe they had a home there. They'd set up house there. That was a real surprise when she passed away.
Yeah, only 59 years old. What happened?
Young. She and Frank both discovered that they had hepatitis C, and Frank, I believe Frank also passed away from complications of hepatitis. So, yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere, and I think it was a surprise to both of them. I think because my friend Jill Nelson wrote a book called Golden Goddesses, and it was the only time I believe that Barbara ever did an interview, and she passed away very soon after it was done. And it was a surprise to everybody. And then she interviewed her daughter Carly, who I'm still friends with on Facebook and talk to every once in a while, to give more context of what happened and what her life was like after she left film. And Carly's in film too. Carly is a jewelry designer and works in wardrobe and costume design now. So she is kind of gone into the family business as well. Because Frank also passed away in 2015. So they're both gone, unfortunately.
You ready to sail the sea? How was she today?
Oh, she was good.
Listen, I don't want any trouble with the police.
No chance.
I just want to get away with you. Stretch out the good days until that's all there are.
Yeah, so let's talk about her part in this movie. She is, like we said, she plays the wife. I think that she's given quite a bit more. You can tell that they give her a lot to work with. It's a part where she is, kind of the spurned wife a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, she kind of is. She's introduced as like the reason that that Alan is looking forward to coming home after the shoot. Like, he's done, he's coming home. He has this gorgeous wife, this gorgeous baby. They have this beautiful boat, in the marina that they like to spend time on. I mean, he has this great life. It's kind of built up as such an idyllic existence that the films are kind of seen as a burden. That it's a situation that he kind of both wants to get out of, but also enjoys the thrill and the danger of making these films, which I think for both of Bob and Alan is true. I think that reflected how they felt at that time.
And her backstory is that she had done some acting before, like her character, right?
Yeah. Yes, they do establish that. And she's like, I can go back to doing that if I need to.
I didn't catch if, she had done hardcore work within this movie, this universe of this movie, or if she was...
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think she was maybe it was another role kind of like Barbara herself, where she only did softcore, and so she wasn't going to do hardcore, and then she retired to have a kid, which is exactly what she did.
Yeah, that must be the case. Yeah, because there's a scene where she visits the set. He tells her like it's not Disneyland, so he was trying to prepare her for something she clearly hadn't seen before. Right.
I'll bring you lunch.
I don't want you to come down there, love. It is not Disneyland.
Hey, the things you say to me sometimes are really weird. The way you look at me is so weird. Sometimes I feel like pouring this wine right over your head.
By the end of the film, you kind of want her to take the kid and leave, because he's given this ultimatum multiple times, and it's not even a situation where she does give him an ultimatum, but it's not always her giving the ultimatum. It's just like life is giving you these options, and you're choosing the wrong one every time. So it's just he just, and his ideas are kind of like just one more big production, I'll get that money, and then I'll leave. And then that just never happens, because you're dealing with these unscrupulous distributors and producers, which is very much the nature of that beast, unfortunately.
And the character that Elaine's character cheats on her with, she's like a Scandinavian actress.
Oh, yeah. Ingrid.
I think they tell her backstory
Inga
too.
Maria.
Yeah, where she's coming down from Big Sur. So I almost feel like maybe there's some elements of Barbara in this character as well, where she's this Inga character is like the kind of hippie chick.
Well, because by that time, San Francisco was known as having more uninhibited hippie type girls that were doing hardcore.
Yeah.
Like the Mitchell brothers were around. Dorenzi was around, like doing loops up in San Francisco. So describing as someone coming down from Big Sur is kind of like, yeah, she's a San Francisco girl. It's really risky for her to be coming down, to be honest. I don't know why she would come down to LA where the heat is on at every shoot. It's, a lot of San Francisco people did not come down to LA because they were perfectly fine staying in the Bay Area, doing what they did and moving on.
Yeah, the great thing about this movie is it does show at this very specific time how dangerous this was for people that were making obscene films. They were always having to look over their shoulder and deal with guys that were always like not giving them their fair share. And yeah, it definitely is a good historical picture about this weird time when porno chic, people weren't going to see, as Deep Throat, like we said, people weren't going to hardcore movies with their significant other yet. It was still kind of it wasn't there yet. This is still like,
and they wouldn't really start doing Deep Throat was one, Devil and Miss Jones, and Behind the Green Door, another San Francisco movie. Yeah, that's very true. But it's also interesting because Bob describes that Vice did visit the set because they followed some of the actresses who were well known for doing these films to the set, and they thought they were going to bust a porno set, and they didn't because they were shooting softcore. So the movie was shot in these kind of fabled studios called the Jack Schwartz Studio in East Hollywood, and that's where a lot of like PRC, like the really low budget B movies in the 40s and even earlier in the 30s, 40s, and 50s were shot. So it's very interesting to note all the different Hollywood connections, even at this point in softcore and hardcore, because a lot of these people who were making these movies had the connections, and they were using them to the best of their advantage, as long as it didn't trace back to people that were a little too high up and couldn't be embarrassed by these productions, like Paul Kohner. Like, I don't know if he knew that his son let his yacht be used in the making of this movie, and I don't even know if he knew that Alan was making hardcore. I imagine something you'd probably keep very close to the breast. And Alan actually took very, very special steps to make sure that he didn't actually... The movies that he produced with Bob and Linda Adrain, they had a deal where... If basically the monies that would come in from those films that they three co-produced, there would be a threshold of money where the money would then go to Alan, and that would buy him out. Or he would buy his way out of the so because he didn't want to actually own any of these movies, because he didn't want it to come back and blow up in his face, because again, he had an ex-wife and a kid, and this absolutely would have been used against him to make sure that he didn't have any kind of
I could see that
visitation or any kind of custody of that kid. I'm really surprised that his daughter is in this film. Because it's not a hardcore film, I think it's more acceptable, but it's a big risk for him to take, considering the state of the legal situation in Los Angeles.
Yeah, if his ex-wife saw that, she might not be too happy.
Right. Yeah. But I think the fact that he named the film's production company after his daughter, I think is kind of sweet. And I think it kind of shows the real reason why he was doing all of this. It's because he was a family man. Whether you get that impression from him in this film or not, he was a family man off camera. So
I came down to the boat. I said I came down to the boat to tell you Mike called. That was the girl, right?
What? She's a model. You mean at the boat?
She's very beautiful. I can see how you'd enjoy balling her.
Now, wait a minute, Liz.
I said I could see how you would.
I haven't been balling that girl.
There's only one girl around here you haven't been balling. And I suppose there have been other times with these models of yours, right?
Oh, that's what you've been carrying around. You've actually been carrying...
How many other times?
No other times.
Come on, Jim.
What are you fantasizing? You're jealous of some poor, pathetic girl around whom you're building a fantasy.
Oh, come off it. Stop turning it around to where it's my problem. You're the one that's balling her, not me.
What do you want from me? The girl needs somebody to talk to. She's just a poor, screwed-up little...
Okay, Freud.
Yeah, you said that the Vice cops were following actresses that were going to shoot a movie about Vice cops following actresses.
Exactly. Very meta.
That's so funny.
Yeah, because, essentially, because, like, you're dealing with actresses that are known like Sandy Dempsey and
Yeah.
Maria Arnold and Suzanne Fields. Like, these are known people.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about them, because I think I think that they are on each side of, some of those faces you'll see in 60s exploitation, some you'll see further along in 70s porn. Like Suzanne Fields. Both. Yeah, some did both.
Yeah. But yeah, she was like, she started really young. Like, she was 19 when she started. And she was this she came from Utah. Like, she came from a heavily Mormon family and came out and was like, yeah, I'll do all this porn. She had no problems doing it. Very interesting lady. She really couldn't act. And she only shows up near the end of the movie, Suzanne Fields. Yeah. And she has a wig ripped off by Roland Miller, which is just, then that, I think that end scene actually really captures just the degradation of being arrested by these vice cops who see these people as dirty and beneath them. And they have contempt for these people because they think they really are just like disgusting people. But we've seen them throughout the film, and we know that they're just people. Like, they're just people trying to make a living, and it's not that big a deal.
Police officers, you're all under arrest. Everybody hold it.
Well, you got it, Warren.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be held against you. You are entitled to legal counsel. Nice try, yourself. We got so much film on you, it's just another grain on a beach full of sand.
Yeah, that last scene where they're busted, they're in, I wonder whose apartment that was. That's the rare scene where they're gone from their warehouse, right, and they're shooting in this apartment building, which is probably what was probably part of the reason they're caught, by shooting in the apartment.
That's the kind of thing you can do in San Francisco. You can't do that in Los Angeles. That's why when you watch a lot of these LA-based hardcore movies, they are they're indoors for most of it. For hardcore, they are indoors. The blinds are drawn. Like, it is secretive. New York films are kind of the same way. Like, they're shot in these apartments, or sometimes like the Bill Wolf soundstage or whatever. But yeah, they're not like San Francisco films, which are a little more open, a little more vibrant in that way.
Yeah, who are the other girls? So you mentioned Sadie Dempsey. There's Eve Orlan. I've seen her
Sonny
face
Boyd
before.
Yes, so I guess if I go in order of appearance, so Maria Arnold is the first girl we see, and she has some really good lines. She's the first girl, and she's
period actress.
No, that's Sandy Dempsey.
Oh, is that Sandy? Okay.
No, yeah, Maria Arnold is the girl who, actually, that scene is interesting because it's Maria Arnold with Charles Lish, who's not credited. He's credited on the movie, and I don't know what his real name is yet, but that's the guy who was in Widow Blue. He was in Sex Psycho. He's the guy who has a gay sex scene and then kills the guy. So he's in that scene with Maria Arnold. So Maria Arnold was another second-generation actor. Her dad was an actor named Phil Arnold. And she was around for quite a while. Eventually, she started just doing softcore stuff. But she was in, Phantasm, which we talked about last week, in a scene with Bill Margold, which was softcore. She was one of the early girls that could really act, and she could do drama and comedy. So you'll see her in softcore stuff like Tanya, where she plays the Patty Hearst stand-in, which is really fun. That's the Novak movie. And then for her hardcore stuff, she plays an assassin in Cozy Cool, which is really good. Yeah, she's quite good. And it was a surprise to be reminded, oh yeah, Charles Lish is in this. And then in that scene, the sound man is Alex Elliott, who is also in Widow Blue. So it's all these Widow Blue people, it's all these Walt Davis people. But I think that just further illustrates how tight this group was. You're just going to use the same people because you know that they can be trusted.
I like the line from that sound man where he's like, next week I'm going to go shoot this horror film, and it's like a step up from what they're doing. He talks about it like it's a big break, I'm going to shoot this legitimate horror movie. Well,
he's interesting. Alex Elliott is interesting because he did hardcore, but then you can see him in stuff like Brain of Blood for Al Adamson. And then Bob described him as, he had no idea what his day job was, but anytime Bob would call him, even if it was for just a crew gig, he would show up because he wanted to work with Bob and he wanted to work on these films. I have no idea where he is now. I'd love to know. because I think he's a really fascinating guy.
Elaine, why didn't you tell me? I mean, you cannot come to work having your period.
You have my apologies.
Oh, you little cunt.
We could turn it into a period piece. It's all right. We can use her for simulation.
So Sandy Dempsey is the period girl. And Sandy Dempsey was one of these girls who was really good at comedy in softcore and hardcore. Like, she could really sell it, but also she's really good in Little Miss Innocence, which it's a very good dramatic role for her. And To Be a Rose, which is another really good dramatic role for her. But she's kind of the perfect girl to have, like, a punchline to the scene, you know.
But she gets,
Yes, and I think most people recognize her because she had a little butterfly tattoo on her thigh, which I think I've never seen it covered up. So it's kind of like, well, you can't hide, Sandy, because you have this very recognizable tattoo. Also in Widow Blue. So another Widow Blue cast member in this. Reports by various people that said she died in 1975 in like a boating accident. I found no evidence of that, so I believe that she is still alive, and I thought I had found her a couple years ago, and I need to follow up on that lead, actually.
Okay.
But she's great. Who else do we got? We got Susan Drager. So her name on the movie is Susan Drager. She did hardcore Susan Westcott.
Westcott, yeah.
And Susan, another star of Widow Blue. So we basically got everyone from Widow Blue in this movie, except for Rick Cassidy and John Holmes. Everyone from Widow Blue is in this movie. I thought she was another really underrated actress. And she was almost exclusively hardcore. She had a bit part in, I think it was Country Cousins, which she had a sex scene with John Tull, and there's a few other softcore ones she did. But she was in Anthony Spinelli's first film ever, which was called Diary of a Nymph, which she's really incredible in. She was in a Jack Gennaro movie called Kitty's Pleasure Palace, which she's really good in. She's terrific. And last time I checked, because I tracked her down, she was a school teacher. So I was didn't really want to reach out to her. I've reached out to teachers before and it has not gone well. So if they're working in education, I tend to not reach out.
That's smart.
Yeah. If they're working with children, I tend not to reach out to people.
Yeah. So here's a question. Based on the scenes that those girls are in and with their partners, it does seem like it was shot hardcore and then edited to be softcore. Do you think that's true? No? You think it was shot?
No.
Just shot it was shot softcore?
Yeah, it was shot softcore.
Even though these actors...
They would not have taken that risk. They would not have taken that risk.
Okay.
No. Especially knowing that Vice came to the set thinking they were shooting hardcore. No, they would not have shot hardcore. And also, Bob has said that.
But how would they prove it?
Shoot hardcore. That's a good question. I don't know. They were convincing. But even Bob has said that it was not intended to be hardcore. It was never going to be hardcore. It was going to be a general release film.
Yeah.
Because their sex scenes don't last that long. They're very graphic. But even then, they were trimmed down for most of the versions that we've seen. The uncut version finally came out on video when Vinegar Syndrome put it out. Before then, we hadn't seen those really graphic sex scenes. Like Sonny Boyd is very vividly rubbing her front. It's very graphic, and it's basically hardcore. And Sonny Boyd, actually, speaking of her, she's another interesting case where she did a lot of hardcore. And she was actually in Fred Halstead's Sex Garage. And I think Sonny Boyd was her real name. Or Sonny was a nickname. But Eve Orlon was the name she used on most of these things. But Sonny Boyd she used on a few features, including this one. So I think that was her real name. We talked about Suzanne Fields.
That's
mostly known for Flesh Gordon, I think. But the thing about this is dealing with these early hardcores, it's the balance of good versus bad is very off. Like, there's so much bad stuff you have to wade through before you can find a really good film that these actresses have made. So,
yes, I would agree.
Because at that time in the early days, it really was about trying to get product into like these theaters quickly and for little money. So that meant very meager scripts. And like the situation with Bob and Alan, they're shooting 2 movies in a day. Doesn't matter if they can act. I don't need a script. We have one location. Let's go. So yeah, it's interesting to see all these women that have these cult followings, which I totally get because I'm a member of that cult, those cults. But having to wade through a lot of stuff to get to the good stuff is just frustrating, but especially because when you see them in their best works, you know how good they are. And then to see them wasted in like really terrible garbage is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about The Suckers before, which is a film that Barbara Mills appears in. And
what a disappointment.
You put them like, it's funny when you put these movies side by side. Yeah, it's just night and day. Not only because this print looks so much better, because a lot of those like early 70s like grindhouse movies, they just look terrible. It's just mud and it's just like scratched to hell. So it's always nice to see like Barbara Mills in a nicely restored picture with good color and good sound.
Hi, how'd it go in there? Did you get a good fuck?
There was a line from the movie where that like kind of shady producer is talking to Elaine's character, and he's, you know, robbing him of $1,000 essentially. And he tells him like, pretty soon we don't need you guys. He's like, the theater owners are going to make our own films. Can you
like Carlos Tobalino.
Yeah, can you expand on that a bit? Like, because that did happen.
That did happen. Yeah, because it was just cheaper. And doesn't mean they were going to be good. I mean, we have people like Carlos Tobalino who's shooting terrible stuff. And then in New York, you have people like the Avon people who were shooting their own stuff. And that's hit or miss. You know, a lot of it is not good.
But I mean, they're hiring directors, like they're hiring competent directors to do the work for them still, right? Or...
I mean, Phil Prince had never directed anything in his goddamn life. He got the job to direct because, I want to direct this.
Yeah.
He was not a director. So, it's like they would find people who could work for cheap. Technical people are the key. You need to find someone who knows how to shoot, how to light, how to edit, and how to get sound if you're shooting live. So basically, if you're going to spend money, doesn't even matter who the fucking director is, right? Especially if they're sex films, really doesn't matter. Because basically, if you watch something like these terrible one-day wonders with some of these actresses in them, you can hear the director. He's just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, do that. And then the camera sits there and just watches them. There's no direction. Basically, these actors are left to their own devices to basically just do what they're being paid to do, which is have sex while the film runs through the camera. So, definitely you saw filmmaker or theater owners who were kind of like, well, I'm going to make my own movies. And actually, there are some good examples of that, like Lowell Pickett and Arlene Elster that owned theaters. They did stuff like Cozy Cool and Straight Banana and some other things, but they were based in San Francisco at that time, I believe. It's interesting to see it this early. Discuss
who would
about these filmmakers.
The real life counterpart to that producer in this movie. I wonder who he's based on.
That's a good question, because I don't know who he's based on. It's like, especially because if he's just like a distributor. I mean, he could have been based on any regional distributor that kind of was like, well, I mean, even someone like Harry Money, who was based in Michigan, who he got with Gail Palmer and they started doing movies, but they were based in Detroit. And he owned a bunch of theaters. Texas people. So you have people, I think that even something as terrible as like Bat Pussy, I think it was probably made by like a theater owner who wanted to get something on the screens because he was tired of paying people. And he's like, I can do this much cheaper.
And he could. And he did.
Yeah. For better or worse.
My old lady and me, we saw your hype in the free press, man. I'm really interested in getting into some good bread. And I'm amiable, can you dig it? My old lady here, she really gives good head. You want to try her, man?
So I'm curious, like, what do you think happened to these characters in this movie, after the end credits? Does it mimic their own life, would you say?
It doesn't mimic Barbara's. Barbara left film, stayed behind the scenes, and Frank kept working, and Frank never directed anything, though. Frank was a cinematographer and a photographer, and a really good one, too. It should be emphasized. Frank Mills was a really, really good photographer. And he eventually got into the union and was shooting for, like, television in Hollywood, while Barbara was, a housewife taking care of the kids. So they made that elevation into being able to survive through work in Hollywood. Alain Patrick, I think he did okay. I mean, the last time I checked, I tried to get him for the Blu-ray, but he didn't respond to my inquiries. The last time I checked, he was in Florida with Vanessa. I believe that they were both based in Florida. But watching that ending of that movie, it's not. It's optimistic, but it's also like I think that we've seen that he can't escape the thrill of it. Like I think he's still cocky as hell and is like, well, I got away with it, and I think he's going to go back and do it again. I think it's a hard thing to quit, and I know Bob has been that way too. I think he said that, and he says that in his book. Like there are a few times like, okay, this is going to be my last movie, and then you just keep going back and getting there are more deals to make more movies. So
I think at the end of the movie, he's still like awaiting an arraignment, isn't he?
Yeah.
So I wonder, what was the punishment for someone like his character in this movie? What would it have been? Would it have been a fine? Is it actual prison time?
I think prison time is generally threatened, but I don't think most people did prison time for this. I think it was usually argued down to like a fine, because many of these people were put in prison, but then they were back out making more movies. I mean, in terms of the actors, they were busted, but then they would get out. I think it was just a fine, but you didn't want that on your record, because if you're going out looking for real work, that will show up.
Well, and it would. As we can see, he doesn't have money to spend on fines. He's got it all tied up in other things. So it would basically ruin him probably if he had to pay a large fine.
Well, see, by this point in the industry, that's why the Adult Film Association of America was kind of made. So it was kind of like a union. You paid your dues. If you were a distributor or a producer or whatever, they had a legal fund, and so they had people that would go and fight your obscenity battles for you. I don't know how active they were in hardcore at that time until later. I know they were involved with various court cases that in the early 70s that were still for like softcore stuff, but you don't see any evidence of him being a member of the AFAA. He's shooting stuff with like one cameraman and one sound guy and like one light on a mattress. Like these are not movies that are sanctioned. Like those producers aren't with the AFAA.
Yeah,
they're fly by night producers that are just making stuff to be paid in cash by distributors.
Yeah.
The distributors might be members of the AFAA, but if you're shooting and it's not for like an established producer that's with the AFAA, you're not going to have legal representation. So they're not going to be like, yeah, we'll take care of you. No, he's not a member. So they wouldn't have done that.
I think Barbara's character makes that point several times. Like, we are on our own here. If we get caught, we're screwed. It's like we have everything in this boat. We have a child. You're risking a lot. You're risking everything doing this.
Right. I mean, even thinking about it largely, they're risking that kid being taken away from them.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that she could potentially lose, even though she's not involved with the films. That could, if they're living together, they could potentially take that kid away because it's being brought up in an immoral household, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
So she has a lot at risk too. It's not just him. So it's kind of like, we gotta get out of this. Like, they just busted your buddy. So, I mean, how much closer does it have to get before you realize that this is going to end badly?
So that scene where, they bring up his buddy being busted is probably the best scene for Barbara, because she gets this look on her face, which is like, she's happy that this happened to their friend, almost like, see, this is like the impetus for us to get out. Like, your buddy got busted, now we're getting out, right? Mm-hmm. And no, they don't get out.
Right.
Christ, where have you been?
Go outside, Mike.
They busted Joe Galano's.
Wait outside, will you?
They busted Galano? Oh, God. Now you can quit. Now it's all over. It has to be. It's too close.
Stop acting like a middle-class bitch. You better make your mind up about what you want. Look, a couple more films and we're clear.
Maybe I have to get straight. I mean, maybe... Okay, I just can't do it here. I've got to go away.
Let me ask you, like, in Bob's book, does he talk about did you run into any instances where he talks about being arrested, or what was the worst case that he dealt with?
Not that I can remember. No, I don't believe so. I think it was just a constant threat.
Just threats.
Yeah, just a constant threat. I mean, he discusses that he was so threatened he had heard through the grapevine that Vice was raiding labs as well to get evidence. So he and Linda took all of their negatives out of Pacific Film Labs, which was Bert Steiger's lab, and they had them lying around their apartment until they sold everything to Harry Money in Michigan. So it's just, and then that's the thing. I have to ask Bob about this. I'm like, okay, so you sold them to some guy in another state. So now you're basically crossing state lines with, objectionable, obscene material. So I was like, unless Harry had some kind of connections, which knowing Harry very well could have, to make sure that it went smooth, that transition went smoothly. But Bob was super duper careful, and he worked with people that he could trust. He worked with all the same people over and over and over again. Bob was such a smart guy. Bob was like, of all the people that I can think of and know in this industry over the years, he is the most reasonable and well-adjusted director, and just highly intelligent. So he knew. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He knew the risks involved, and he kind of always factored those in when he was shooting everything. And the fact that he was able to make any kind of quality product while he was terrified he was going to get busted, I think is a testament to how good he is.
So Bob was just executive producer on this. Did Bob say anything about how this movie did financially?
No, they sold it. They just
sold it for a flat fee and moved on.
As long as they could get the money back on their investment, which was $35,000. Yeah, it was a done deal.
Interesting.
Which is the nature of this. Directors would not be following the financial success of their films unless they had a percentage deal. And Crown International bought this hook, line, and sinker, so there's no percentage deal for him to follow.
Well, because he
was just moving on to the next one. Like he was still producing stuff with like Roland Miller, like he did All American Girl for Mark Haggard, Brother Sister, Devil's Garden with Roland as well. So like he was moving on and doing other stuff. He really never stopped, to be honest.
I would think that him and Alain would want to know like how well it's doing, because maybe they would want to do more softcore films instead of doing strictly hardcore. No,
I don't think so.
Because then they wouldn't shift their operation. Like, hey, look, we're making good money on the softcore movie over here. Maybe we should do more of those. But they didn't seem to do that. I don't think
so. No, I don't think so. No, I don't think there was even any interest to keep doing them. Devil's Garden was shot softcore, but that wasn't with Alan. Yeah, and I mean the market was going hardcore, so there wasn't going to be a market for softcore. Yeah. They're lucky that this got released by a major company, because softcore was getting like shelved or like dumped with little fanfare at this point. They're lucky that it got released at all, to be frank.
Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't get recut into a hardcore version.
Crown International wouldn't have done that. They didn't handle hardcore.
But some other company, maybe Crown would have sold it to another company that recut it and added more inserts or something. I don't know.
I don't see Crown doing that. If they'd given it to Novak, absolutely. Because Novak recut like Booby Trap and Behind Locked Doors into X-rated stuff. Tower of Love, I believe he was not shot hardcore. But Crown was not that. Crown was like, Crown was a major... It was kind of a mini major. It was kind of like a mini AIP. So they were not gonna. They weren't gonna think about trying to make any money with hardcore. There was enough that it was a movie about the hardcore industry that was not really pro the hardcore industry. It was much more of a cautionary tale about the industry than anything. So of course it's going to be much more digestible to mainstream audiences. But Alan and Bob were going to continue working in that industry because that was the name of the game. Hardcore was it. That's why I'm kind of surprised Devil's Garden even came out. That came out after this, and that was softcore with people who had done hardcore in it. Yeah. I'm not sure if that was a Roland Miller thing. Roland Miller might have been uncomfortable doing hardcore, because I think all the films that he was involved with that I can recall were all softcore, because that was what Roland wanted to be involved with. But even he stopped producing stuff because there wasn't the market for it. I think Russ Meyer and Manny Condi and kind of Novak, but even Novak moved away from sex at all after a while. We're the only ones who kept doing softcore in the 70s after a certain point. Yeah,
this film does exist.
Friedman tried to go tried to go mainstream with like Johnny Firecloud, and then he had to get into hardcore eventually because that was just what you had to do. That was the market.
Yeah, so, this film does exist in a very unique place, I feel like, which is kind of why I thought it was an interesting one to talk about. Because we've only talked about, the 60s sexploitation stuff, but this is kind of the last gasp of that almost, in a way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Mary, don't lie there like you're waiting for the extreme unction. Give him something to come home to. Turn him on. Caress him. Move your incredible little ass. Love him.
If only it was you, baby.
Well, you'll have to fantasize. Get some fantasies going.
All the time. Hey, how about some fast head?
Hey, over here.
I like it long, mouse prick.
Okay, we're ready here. I got a meeting, folks.
What's your final take on this movie's
I picked it for Barbara.
History.
It was shot right before Barbara got pregnant with her first child.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the last gasp for her too. She didn't really do a lot more after this. And I think she even discussed it. She's kind of like, I think she was perplexed that people were actually interested in her career because, as she said, she was only in it for a few years. She was never really a big star. She didn't have that many lead roles. The ones she did are really good. But I don't think she was trying to be a star. I think she was just working and having fun.
Yeah.
And it helped that Frank was in the industry too. So I think it was like, they're kind of a couple in the industry that you don't hear about. Like you hear about like Renee Bond and Rick Lutz. But you don't really hear about Barbara and Frank Mills, which is interesting because they arguably turned out the most successful of all of those real-life couples that were in porn.
Right, they were together.
In sexploitation.
Yeah, they were together till the end.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they died. She died, I think she described it was like their 40th anniversary that year. And then she passed away shortly after, which is...
Wow.
Yeah. Rough.
Yeah, so the other two movies you recommended were
Love Garden.
Love Garden, yep. Which
also has the Bob Chinn connection because he executive produced that as well.
It's a little bit more.
Bob remembers Barbara very fondly because they kept working together even after she stopped making movies because she worked on John Holmes films that he directed as like the makeup artist and the continuity girl because Frank was still working in the business. So he remembers her very fondly, which I like to hear. I mean, it sounded like she didn't really, I don't think, have that many friendships with people within the industry. She was close with Lynn Harris, as she said in her interview, which I love to hear because Lynn, I think, was really sweet. But the other one I recommended, well, there's a few. Sweet Georgia, she's great in Sweet Georgia. And that has I think that was the first one I ever saw of hers, actually. And that was the iconic topless horseback riding.
The horse riding, yeah.
Yes, which she's so good at.
She looks comfortable.
It looks like she's a professional. Yeah. I'm just like, you know how to command this horse. And she's really good in that. And there's something I noted in my Letterboxd review is that long takes of dialogue, not improvised, with Marsha Jordan. And they're both really good. Yeah. So when you notice that there's no editing, it's just them with, pages of dialogue. It makes it more impressive. It's like, oh, yeah, she was kind of a diamond in the rough here. Like, they cast really well. I would also recommend Class of 74, which I think not a lot of people like, and I don't think Barbara really cared for it that much either. It's kind of a repurposing of a movie she did called Gabriella. I think the director was Mac Bing, and I don't think it was ever distributed, but it was purchased by Arthur Marks of General Film Corporation, and he repurposed it and basically brought her back 2 years later to shoot more scenes with like Sandra Curry and some other actresses as an R-rated general release film. And it's other than Chain Gang Women, I think it's probably her most mainstream film appearance because and she's really gorgeous in it. She looks basically the same between the 70 footage and the 72 footage. She seems like she's having a blast, but she described the experience the actress she worked with she liked, but she said the director wasn't good, and I was like, oh yeah, Arthur Mark's not a very good director. But,
did she say anything about working with Lee Frost on Chain Gang Women?
No, I think she just described that she thought it was funny that she was dubbed in that movie.
Yeah.
Was by somebody else, which is interesting because Love Garden, that whole movie is dubbed, but it's dubbed by the 3 actors because the sound guy on that movie was some UCLA student who basically came to the set one day and said all the sound reels for the movie were stolen out of my car for the entire movie. So they had to have a dubbing session with all 3 actors. And then this amazing editor, Ray Nadeau, had to edit it, minutely so that it all matched perfectly.
Wow.
I can't actually, speaking of dubbing, I really can't say enough about her voice. Her voice is she always had a really great voice. And I feel like she could have gone into dubbing or voiceover work if she wanted to. Very, very smooth, very cultured speaking voice. I know she dubbed a voice on Long Swift Sword of Siegfried, actually, for Friedman. Like, she dubbed one of the German actresses' voice. Yeah, and I was like, is this accurate? But then I watched it again, and I was like, oh, that's definitely her voice. Her voice is very recognizable. So that got me excited. I was like, oh, good. So basically, she got hired not just to take her clothes off in these movies. She got hired to go into a dubbing studio and record a voiceover for a movie. I mean, that's pretty impressive, and I think speaks a lot to how well liked she was by people in this industry. They just were like, well, we know you're good. Come on in here and let's do some dubbing.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can get past her voice in Chain Gang Women, it's a pretty interesting role for her. She doesn't show up till later, pretty late, but her character's very important to the plot and important to the ending.
I mean, it's so important that the character's name is Wife. Yeah, very important. Very important. Yeah, just like I remember really loathing that film. I haven't watched it in years and years and years and years, and not just because it's a misleading title, just because I remember like it not going anywhere.
You're not wrong, but there's a weird dark irony to the ending that I kind of liked, and
I don't even remember the ending.
And Barbara Mills is a key part of that, so that's all I'll say. Because I don't want to spoil that one.
Right. And I think you watched, Sex and the Lonely Woman, which is the private arrangement, which I still haven't seen. Believe it or not, as a Barbara fan, I still haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, she's a lead. I don't know what more to say about it. It's pretty short and grubby, and her co-star is just like has zero charisma. It's
a bummer.
But Barbara, you should
see Matinee Wives. I think you would like Matinee Wives. And
I saw that on the list. I wanted to get to
Christine Murray again, and Christine Murray, aka Luann Roberts. Great in everything. She's kind of the only thing I like about Affairs of Aphrodite, which is the Alain Patrick movie that is on the Blue Money Blu-ray, which is like, it's there for added value. I don't know how much that value is.
No, it's great.
It's there.
I like it when they do that because you can see, like I told you can see the difference between
Yes. Big progression.
Love Affairs of Aphrodite is like a high school theater nudie, and
very much so.
It has like emulsion scratches, the manual ones over the crotches. Right. So it's like, okay, so this is where we're coming from. Is from, when we had to have guys like scratch out genitals, and now you can show genitals but not penetration, and then we can show everything and more in the span of like a couple years.
In 70, you could show crotches. I don't know if that's just the only print they had and it had been censored by a projectionist because it was maybe a regional censorship thing. Because you can see crotches in like films like The Joys of Jezebel, which is the same year with Christine Murray. Lots of crotches. Like, I think at that point, I forgot about that part of the print. I think that was a regional censorship thing.
Yeah,
I think there's a movie called Eat, Drink, and Make Merry that Something Weird put out, which is a Whit Boyd movie, which has the same thing. I think it has a projectionist who's censored out the beaver and the pickles, so to speak.
Because Lee Frost, like Mondo movies, those Mondo Freudo and what's the other one?
Mondo Bizarro.
Bizarro, they have those scratches in there, but those were 68, so I think that was intentional on their end.
Those were definitely intentional because I think it's supposed to look like these have been censored by like customs or something, you know. It adds into that whole Mondo idea of like, this is genuine footage. Well, my question is, because you've never seen a Barbara Mills film before, like, what are your thoughts on Barbara Mills now?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think she was talented for sure when she was given something to do, but more often than not, it seems like she wasn't given too much. I think she has that I know she's not like born in California, but she totally passes as like this California bohemian girl. Like I said, like total girl next door vibes, like super cute. I think she just like seems super lovable in everything that she does. Yeah.
I think she's one of the most, for me, I think she's one of the most gorgeous women to ever have made these films. And
it's a very she has a very natural look that I think is very identifiable for a lot of people. That's like she doesn't look like a lot of those Cali sexploitation actresses. She's not like a Pat Barrington or something like that.
Yeah, I think she's instantly recognizable. She stands out from and that's kind of tough because I think a lot of sexploitation filmmakers are kind of going for like blondes or redheads. And so brunettes is kind of like, well, yeah, blondes have more fun and redheads are like a novelty. And so brunettes kind of get the short end of the stick, basically. But she is so recognizable in everything. She just had like Gretchen Rudolph, flawless bone structure in the face, just this gorgeous smile. So she appeared in a considerable number of not great movies, like a lot of other women in this genre. But the fact that she's still memorable in all of them, I think, is a testament to how lucky we got that she decided to step in front of the cameras for even the few years that she did before she just decided to stop and raise a family, which was the right choice for her.
Agreed. Well, thanks for bringing her to my attention and hopefully many others' attention as well.
I don't know how you're going to include any shots from Sweet Georgia on the Instagram.
Yeah. I will have to go back. Because the most
memorable thing about that is the topless horseback riding. But there's so many good shots. That's the thing. The camera just loves her. It really does. And she's just so stunning. I remember when she passed, shortly after she passed away, because I was friends with her. I was friends on her on Facebook too. And so if I ever post anything with her, I'll always tag her just so if anyone who was friends with her will remember this part of her life, because she remembered it, positively in the end after everything. I took screenshots of all of her best movies because I couldn't find any good still photos of her. So I took all these shots of there's a shot from Class of 74 where she has these glasses on and she, has her, and it's a montage of her trying stuff on. And it's like a Pretty Woman montage with Barbara Mills, which is instantly iconic. And so I took all these great shots of her and tagged her in it. And I was just like, I want y'all to remember Barbara Mills. She's a stunner, absolute stunner.
Well, thanks again, Casey. Any final thoughts?
Thank you, Bob, and happy birthday, Bob. And thank you, Alain.
Yeah, happy birthday, Bob.
I appreciate it. I'm really glad this movie just fell into my lap. It was a total random discovery. Crown really didn't do a lot with it in the home video market, so it wasn't until the DVD era that it became more widespread and known. But and also thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara, for lighting up our lives in so many interesting movies.
Make it before the tape goes.
Oh, I'm making it.
I am making